What it do, family and friends? Before we get into today's broadcast, I want to do a little housekeeping. I want to make some people aware of some situations. A lot of people have been waiting on this Epstein quote unquote list to drop. And there's a lot of misinformation and disinformation going around out there. First and foremost, the first piece of misinformation is that it's a list. It isn't a list, what's being released. It is an unredacted court document from about 8 to 10 years ago when Virginia Gunfrey sued Ghislaine Maxwell. And it is a 943-page document. Okay? So if you're seeing anybody bring up a list without showing you the documents, then just disregard them. Because the document, the things that was unredacted, were the very same thing that we've been talking about years ago. So nothing new has came out of this. Right now, all you're getting is confirmation from a lot of the names that was already confirmed on the flight list. And just so everybody knows, yes, I do have the document. Right now I'm on page 101. And I am carefully reading through it. I am taking notes. I am taking names. And then when I do my broadcast on this within about a week or so, because I want to make sure I comb through this with a fine-tooth comb, when I do my broadcast on this topic, I'm going to actually show you guys the names in these documents. And just so you guys know that this is the document, let me set it to 0. Hold on 1 second. This is the letter here from the judge, January 3rd, 2024. And this is regarding the Gunfrey versus Maxwell case. Okay? But I will give you guys a trinket of information. If you guys remember, when this case was going on, there were several people sending letters to the judge, begging the judge to not release this information because it would destroy them and all this other stuff. Well, on the second page, that goes Exhibit 4, the first thing you see right after Exhibit 4 is one of those letters. It's one of those letters. And when you see who it is from, the Terrorism Project, Facebook, Twitter, Google+, Pinterest, Instagram, Pledge, The Daily Catch. This one letter represents all of that. Represents all of these companies. However, we're going to save that for the breakdown, but I want you guys to know I do have it. And no, it is not a list. It is a 943-page document that was unredacted from 8 years ago. Okay? So it's going to take time to comb through them. As you can see, I've started highlighting some things, and we're going to get to that. Okay? But you got to give me some time. And once I finish combing through this document, then we're going to go into it in depth. In depth. Now, with that being said, let's move on. Hold on, let me change this back to the page I was on so I don't forget where I was at. Let's move on to today's topic. Reparations. Splitting Democrats and putting obstacles in Biden's path to re-election. Reparations. Splitting Democrats and putting obstacles in Biden's path to re-election. Well, we told you what was going on. The black grassroots has been saying this is going to happen with no problem. Now, whether or not they're genuine, that's not the case. My point is this. You have, and we're forcing people to actually take a stance on reparations. Either you're on this side or you're on that side, because reparations is the line in the sand. And you have people like Biden who refuse to address the situation with reparations. And now you have different Democrats coming out. Talking about their support for reparations. Or they come out and do a phony study for reparations like New York, or California, and blah, and blah. We have people who are now trying to use it in their campaign against Biden, like Dean Phillips here, who not just wants to give reparations according to his platform, who don't just want to give reparations, but want to give universal basic income as well. But that's all a trick bag to us in the first place, because when you think about it, is one, you're talking about giving reparations and then you turn around and also say universal basic income. You're just trying to satisfy everybody. But you can't just go around trying to satisfy everybody when the debt is actually owed to us. So you're trying to get people like the poor whites and poor Asians and poor whoever else on your side. But the problem with that is you can't do that when you still have a debt to pay. First and foremost, there's a debt to be paid. There's a debt owed. So that goes back to, what would his version of reparations look like? What would his version of reparations look like? But that's neither here nor there as of right now, because the point, and I'm going to be touching on this on another broadcast as well, but the point of this broadcast is to show you that the reparations conversation is amping up. Even Chicago Mayor Brandon Johnson has jumped in on the topic, talking about how reparations would tackle the cycle of violence amid the 17% surge of crime in Chicago. But the truth of the matter is, reparations had nothing, the black community had nothing to do with that surge in crime. It was his policies with these illegal immigrants that he pulled in and started giving funds to and putting them in certain areas and refusing to arrest them and deport them when they commit a crime. They just arrest them and release them back out on the street. We'll be doing a broadcast on that as well, most likely tomorrow. Not just Chicago, but New York as well. Arresting migrants several times over, the same illegal committing crimes. There's one that committed over 17 crimes and was released every single time. So that's why the crime has gone up, Mayor Brandon Johnson. But I do agree with you. Reparations is necessary to help tackle the crime in our community. Absolutely. That would definitely help tackle the crime percentage. But don't just say that that's going to take care of your problem in Chicago as a whole when your problem stems from your unwillingness to actually call out Joe Biden for his open border policy. For his open border policy. So, with all this, with all these people talking about reparations nowadays, we're now moving on to Cornel West, who just released this video on the 3rd. And he wants to talk sly nowadays. We've already established, I've already done a broadcast on Cornel West and how he don't believe in reparations, how he believes social programs would be more beneficial than reparations. Well, now it's undeniably a situation where he cannot do anything but advocate for reparations in the way that we want reparations, the way that it's supposed to be. But what he tries to do, and not just him, but many other politicians and many other people who want to speak about reparations, but they want to change what reparations looks like, he goes and he talks sly to the people. And he tried to talk slick like an old school pimp and talk about how he gonna do things with pizzazz. With pizzazz. This is what he said about reparations, and I'm gonna go back to what I replied with. In our quest for racial justice, this campaign commits to bold, transformative policies. We advocate for reparations, which sounds good. But until you start to read deeper into it and see that his reparations is nothing but the social programs that he once spoke about. And the social programs to affect all. We advocate for reparations, acknowledging the historical debt to Black Americans. He did mention the historical debt to Black Americans. So why then do you go and speak about programs that would be social and widespreading rather than focusing in on the people that the reparations, the reparative situation need to address? So let's see what type of reparations he was talking about. Acknowledging the historical debt to Black Americans with the directive to complete this process in 2 years. 2 years. What are you going to do in 2 years when it comes to reparations? You can't. You can't fund the reparation program in 2 years because there's trillions of dollars that's owed to Black Americans, the descendants of American slaves. And 2 years isn't going to cut it. You're going to need a longer program than that, buddy. You can't repair a 400-year problem in 2 years. You can't repair 50, 60 years of Jim Crow in 2 years. You can't repair the system inside and out and rip out all of the anti-Black racist policies and replace them with just policies for the Black community in 2 years. It's impossible. It's improbable. But let them tell it. They want to get that shit, get it popping within 2 years. Okay. We'll push for a filibuster-proof budget, reconciliation for reparations, and land back. Mirroring the Civil Rights Act of 1988, our plan includes ending mass incarceration, ensuring voting rights for all incarcerated and returning citizens, and addressing the alarming mortality, I don't know I don't know what I'm tripping. Mortality rate in black pregnancies. I don't know what it is. Give me a second. Let me take a drink real quick. Okay, excuse me. All right. So, let me read that again. Da, 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 da. Where were we here? Da, 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 da. We'll push for filibuster-proof budget reconciliation for reparations and land back. Mirroring the Civil Rights Act of 1988, our plan includes ending mass incarceration, ensuring voting rights for all incarcerated and returning citizens, all incarcerated and returning citizens, and addressing the alarming mortality rate in black pregnancies. We call for public review commissions for police forces nationwide and the reinstatement of key sections of the 1965 Voting Rights Act. Establishing a land back commission is necessary to recertify, to rectify, I don't know why I said that, to rectify injustices against indigenous peoples, along with a dedicated federal response to the crisis of missing and murdered indigenous women. We also vow to implement the Justice for Black Farmers Act on day one of my presidency. Our roots may be on the chocolate side of town, but our fight for truth, justice, and love spans every community. Notice, every community. Notice, every community. Now, I'm not going to lie. Some of these things here sounds good. It sounds good. And then you start looking at a lot of the places where it stops sounding good, where they start talking about against indigenous peoples. Not specifically Black Americans, because that's what reparations is supposed to be for. It's for us, Black Americans, the descendants of American slaves. The Native Americans already got theirs. And if he's saying that we're indigenous peoples, that's fine. Why didn't you just say for Black Americans? You're throwing in black, but then you start tossing in indigenous, which will confuse and complicate the wording, the language, which confuse and complicates the language. So let's go down here and I'll let you hear what he had to say. And then I'll go back and read my response I left with him.
To my dear Black brothers and sisters, the very community and tradition from which I come, Shiloh Baptist Church on the one hand, the Black Panther Party on the other, the legacy of Martin Luther King on the other, I want you to know that the vicious effects of the legacy of white supremacy is something that is crucial in this campaign. And yes, I talk about workers. Yes, I talk about Palestinians. Yes, I talk about rural folk who are on the vanilla side of town. But I come from the chocolate side of town. And I begin on the chocolate side of town and allow my concern about love and justice to flow over to every corner, every borough, indigenous peoples or whatever. But in the end, you should know that the Black predicament is my starting point, and I will never, ever be silent in the face of police brutality, in the face of police murder, in the face of discrimination, in the face of degradation. And I'll do it in the style of an Ella Fitzgerald and Muhammad Ali, which is to keep swinging. It don't mean a thing if it ain't got that swing.
So that's what he had to say. I may speak about all these other people, but I come from the chocolate side of town. Right now, the black community is in the place where we need direct representation. We don't need a scattered representation. We don't need it. And Brother Cornel West, if you ever listen to this, I don't have a problem with you wanting to be that bridge between different communities. What I have a problem with is you taking our story and then using it as a platform to shoot out policies for everyone else. Social equity policies is not reparations. You start out really well in this post that you made here because you were addressing the people who it's supposed to address. But then you take your absence and leave because then you start bringing in other situations like all communities, like indigenous peoples. When it comes to wording, I look at the wording, especially when you have a platform where you have many people working with you. And what you say can be taken out of context. So you know how to word what you're saying. You've been doing it for years. But the fact that you're trying to pull this sleight of hand nonsense, it's not going to fly. It's not going to fly. I don't even care about your sleight of hand magic trick. Because I'm not going to be amazed by what happened. How did it happen? No, we already know how these things happen. It's been happening for so long, we already know how these things come about. And unfortunately, it's listening to people such as yourself. It's listening to people such as Robert F. Kennedy, who believe reparations should be micro loans. Your reparations should be taking a loan and paying it back to a company that isn't black owned, that isn't even, so you're enriching another community by taking out these micro loans. That's supposed to be a payment towards a debt owed to the people who built the country and then was locked out of the benefits of building a country, while everyone else comes here and benefits off the back of the labor of the people who built the country and who are locked out of those benefits. We're having so many people come around trying to convince us that our reparations should be making other people wealthy, putting ourselves further in debt rather than giving us what's owed to us so we can take care of all debts. This is why we're seeing the decline with the Democratic Party. This is why we see the decline with most Democrats as of right now. When I asked Sheila Jackson Lee about her plan, how and what would she do to restabilize Black Houstonians? Y'all heard her answer. It was a everybody program. And because of that, she lost. She wanted to be more like Whitmore. And so the people say we might as well vote for Whitmore. We're at a time right now where people's trying to tell us what we should want. Well, that's not how the game works. Because there's a precedence for what reparation is. And we're going to talk about that. But let me go to my response to Cornell. I said, if you're not talking to us about cash payments, then everything else is just social policies. We know what reparations looks like for everyone else. That's what it should look like for us as well. We are owed a debt, and debts must be paid in cash. That slick talk means nothing. That slick talk means nothing. Obama came slick talking. Don't y'all remember? And then turned around and gave everything to everybody else and deprived the black community of even a bill to stop people from killing us. Gonna go to Trayvon Martin's funeral singing and talk about if I had a son, he would look like Trayvon. No shit, Sherlock. What you gonna do about it? I would have asked where'd you find the clue, but it doesn't seem like you found the clue whatsoever, Sherlock. Maybe Watson found one for you, but you didn't find a clue, Sherlock. So with everybody talking about what reparations they intend to bring to the table, let me bring you over here to this article here. It's a PDF. I'll drop a link to it in the comment section or in the description, excuse me. And this is given and brought to us, by the Movement for Black Lives. What are reparations? And this right here is exactly what I've been telling people. There are guidelines to what reparations is due to international policy. That's just what it is. And it is very, very easy to know what reparations is. Now, the problem with this organization is that they're not specific, because it's supposed to be for just the descendants of American slaves. But as you can see, they're working within Cobra here. So just take this whole portion, most of this, with a grain of salt. A grain of salt. But here are the 5 criterias. Here are the 5 criterias for reparations. Period, point in black. This is what the 5 criterias are according to international law. Succession and assurance and guarantee of repetition. I was about to say repetitiveness, but anyway, repetition, non-repetition. Under international law, a state responsible for wrongfully injuring a people is under an obligation to cease the act. Excuse me. I think that's a mistake there. To cease the act if it's continuing and B, oh, I see. Okay. So let me reread that. Under international law, the state responsible for wrongdoing, injuring, and a people, willfully injuring a people, is under an obligation to A, cease the act of, if it's, oh, I don't know. What's wrong with me today? All right. Try this one more time. Take 15. Under international law, a state responsible for wrongfully injuring a people is under an obligation to A, cease the attack if it is continuing, and B, offer appropriate assurances and guarantees of non-repetition, which means policies to make sure it never happens again. Like when the so-called Jewish community says never again, and they're always teaching about the Holocaust, but they're always trying to, get us and have us get over it. They do it so that it'll never happen again, but they tell us to get over it. They tell us to get over it. Compensation. And I'm not going right down the list. I'm just reading in any order I wanted to. Compensation. The injuring state, institution, or individuals is obligated to compensate for the damage. If damage is not made good by restitution, which you can't make good by restitution because all the stuff that was taken was so long ago, land and all this other stuff, it'd be harder for them to give us anything that we owed. They ain't gonna go back and take back land from the dang slave families that was given back the land when they took it from us after Lincoln gave us that land over by, in Florida and all that other stuff. They're not going to go and take that land back and return it to us. They're not going to take people off of their land to return it to us. So compensation is necessary. Compensation is necessary. Now the restitution means to reestablish the situation which existed before the wrongful act was committed. And that's what I'm saying. There's no way they can do that. So they have to give the compensation. Now they can give us land. They can absolutely give us land. But they cannot give us back that land that was taken from us. So we can be compensated with new land. With new land. Changes traced to the wrongful act are reversed through restoration of freedom, recognition of humanity, identity, culture, repatriation, livelihood, citizenship, legal standing, and wealth to the extent they can be. And if they cannot, restitution is completed by compensation. That's why I read compensation before the restitution. In repatriation, repatriation, whatever. Satisfaction is part of full reparations under international law for moral damages, such as emotional injury, mental suffering, and injury to reputation. An injury to reputation. Tell me they haven't injured our reputation over the past 500 years or so. In some instances where sensation, restitution, and compensation do not bring full repair, satisfaction is also needed. Apology falls under the reparative category of satisfaction. And last but not least, rehabilitation. It's the last thing that is necessary. It's the last thing that is necessary for reparations to be reparations. Rehabilitation shall be provided to include legal, medical, psychological, and other care and services. That's it. Those are the 5 criteria needed in order for a reparations package to be a reparations package. And it has to be geared towards a specific group of people who suffered those injustices. So like I said, I will drop this in the description. This is a good read here, even though you got to take it with a grain of salt, because like I said, they're working with Big Bird's group in Cobra. So we definitely don't want to agree with them too much, because they want reparations for everybody black in America. I think that this is a good read here just to have. So when people bring up this topic, you have that, no, that's not reparations whatsoever. Reparations are not just saying sorry or feeling bad while avoiding accountability for individual or collective contributions to the violation, or while benefiting from the harm, whether through inheritance or ongoing privileges. Paying an individual black person's bills is not reparations. Donating any amount of money to a black institution, unless accompanied by acts of repair, restitution, and efforts to leverage power, influence, and resources to ensure cessation and non-repetition. I am tripping out right now, but we're coming to an end, so it's all gravy. And non-repetition, simply writing a check is not reparations. I'm going to read that one more time. Simply writing a check is not reparations. So now that we know what isn't reparations, reparation also not the same thing as divest or invest. Robert Kennedy Jr. It is not the same. Like I said, this will be in the description. But I just wanted to say, family, we at this point. We're at this point where people are now coming out more and more talking about how popular reparations is becoming for the descendants of American slaves, but they're trying their hardest to change that. They're going to try their hardest to make sure it's universal. They're going to try their hardest to make sure it's social programs. Excuse me. They're going to try their hardest. Give me 1 second. All right. They're going to try their hardest and continue to try their hardest. They have so many different ways to go about trying to shoehorn their way into reparations. Not just people who look like us but are not of the lineage, but people who don't look like us, who aren't a part of the lineage, trying to shoehorn their way into the conversation. But we stand on our square. And the Democratic Party is even going to have to bend the knee or lose continuously for now on and for here on out. It's a new dawn. It's a new day. It's a new light for me. In the words of our immortal sister. So I don't get why anybody feels like they can come to us and try to play us with some nonsense. A study here, a study there. When there's been studies all over the place. Truman has one of the most in-depth studies to ever hit the history books. Let me rephrase that because it never hit the history books. To ever hit into the history of our people. Truman did a study, the Truman Report, where it talked about illegal immigration hurting Black Americans as well. It talked about how we are overcharged, overpriced, overscaled on everything. And another book that speaks about that is The Black Tax. If you have not read that book, The Black Tax, then I suggest you go and read that book. The Black Tax, The Cost of Being Black, by Sean D. Rochester, excuse me. That's my fault. By Sean D. Rochester. And yeah, it's an amazing book. It breaks down like to the very last compound how Black Americans are overcharged in every single thing we do. From buying a house, buying a car, getting loans, business loans. It's a very great read. But that's why we are not budging. That's why we shall not be moved. The agenda is clear. No tangibles. No reparations. No vote. You're going down. We don't have to participate. My people didn't die for my right to vote. My people died for my right to have equality and equity. And they didn't die. A lot of them was unalived because they were fighting for our equity and equality. Not just equality, equity. what was owed to us. I'm coming next time we go to DC. We're coming for that check. If you haven't hit the like button yet, hit that like button. If you're not subscribed, make sure you hit the subscribe button. If you think that you're subscribed, please check and make sure that you're still subscribed, because YouTube has been dropping some of my followers like flies. And they've been hitting me and letting me know that they checked and all of a sudden they're not following me anymore. So if you follow me, check and make sure that you are still following me. Make sure you have your notification bells on. Over the next 4 days, there's going to be an onslaught of videos for you guys. But much love to you guys. The doors of the church are now closed. Peace, family.